Hey, it's Sheeta, and I'm here today to talk to you about racism in Mexico. Why are we talking about this? Why are we doing this? If you don't know me and you're like, who is she to have this conversation? Okay. My name is Rashida Dow. I've lived in Mexico City on and off for 3 years, and I talk about my life in Mexico. I'm making this video in response to a very specific comment I got on one of my videos. It was the video where I was showing my experience of leaving Mexico City and going to San Miguel de Allende by bus. And I was able to film the immigration experience and what it looked like when they checked IDs to make sure that everyone on the bus was legally allowed to be in the country. Here's the comment. Strange that your card was the only one taken. You push this narrative about the lack of racism there, but it seems alive and well there. I figured we need to talk about this because I don't understand how someone watching my video could say I push a narrative of there being no racism in Mexico when I frequently say racism. It's all around us. Anti-Blackness is universal. It's global. It's everywhere. There's nowhere on this planet you can go where people, including Black people, haven't had the idea that Blackness is negative and it's inferior drilled into them for centuries. Now, in different places, and with different people, there's a certain level of rejecting that idea, right? And coming to your own terms with what Blackness is and what it means to be Black and what it means to deal with Black people. And everyone's at different levels. But I will never get on this channel and tell you that there's a magical place on earth where there is no racism. That is not Mexico. It's not Mexico City. I don't know why you can watch one of my videos and think that. I do say that I encounter less racism in Mexico than I do in the US, but that's not to say there is no racism in Mexico. So today we're going to talk about what it's like to be a Black woman in Mexico and how I feel like I'm treated. Now, I want to be really clear here. I'm speaking about the Black expat experience in Mexico. I'm not speaking about what life is like as an Afro-Mexican because I'm not Afro-Mexican and I can't speak to that experience. Like we shouldn't be speaking to experiences that we don't have, right? I cannot embody the experience of what it's like to grow up Afro-Mexican because I didn't. I cannot speak to the history as well as someone who is Afro-Mexican and can speak to the history. And so when I say Black in Mexico, I'm speaking of a specific subset, and that are the immigrants who have moved here from another country, not the people who were born and raised here. When I was working out my thoughts for this video, I was like, let me see what they're saying on YouTube. Let me do a little quick check. So I actually searched for, I think it was like Black in Mexico, see what people are saying. And I found a video by our good friend Asia Arrow, one by Yinks and one by VR Bros, special guest on the channel. And I looked at all of their views on what life is like as a Black immigrant in Mexico. And I don't want to say Black Americans because Yinks isn't American. He lived in Canada and he's Nigerian, but Yinks said something in his video that I say in mine quite frequently, and that it's, I feel free here. I feel freer than I do in America. I feel like being Black might separate me from the majority of the population. There's a distinct difference between how I present and how the majority of the population presents, but I've never felt like that was the reason that I was treated a specific way, except for a few things. We'll get into that. The few things were all institutional, right? They were all coming from the government. And the Yarbrough spoke to that in their video about how there is institutional racism here. It's a thing. It's a thing everywhere. Everywhere there's a government, you will find some variety of racism and colorism. Like it's just It's the world we live in. But what I've experienced here is like one of the things that's happened to me here, and I referenced it earlier on in this video when I talked about the comment that the watcher made, was that when I was on a bus, the only ID that needed to be verified to make sure that it wasn't fraudulent was mine. And I was also the only Black person on the bus. Would I ever say that wasn't racism? No, I wouldn't. Would I say that I experienced less negative impacts of institutional racism in Mexico than in the US? Yes, I do. Because the interaction with the immigration officer happened in Spanish, I didn't understand all of it. And even in the video, I couldn't hear all of it. But I had some eagle-eared, is that a word? I had some very close listeners who speak Spanish who were able to translate it. But even the translation comes with a little bit of like, we don't like that. So let me tell you what one person said was happening in that interaction. Okay, I watched twice the part about the immigration officer. She's not asking why you got your residency, but the reason of how you got your residency. In other words, she wanted to know if you're a Haitian refugee or a Central American of political asylum, or just a normal North American foreigner, American or Canadian, that applied for residency in Mexico. It does sound very sad, but she's basically looking for Central and Caribbean, African or South American. And as soon as she checked on the system that you were an American resident, she said gracias and bye. I understand the viewer was trying to be helpful, but I think there's a lot of loaded language in that comment that we could spend hours deconstructing, but we're not going to do it here because that's not what this video is. But the fact that like I'm a normal North American tourist versus a refugee or someone who's seeking political asylum mattered for why, right? Like I have a residency permit. It is legal. It has valid dates. Why on a bus through the country are you checking to see why I got the status? And why is it okay once you find out I'm a normal North American tourist? Like what inherently, if I have I was given permission to be here. My ID says I was given permission to be here for a certain date. It's got an expiration date. You can check that, boom. Doesn't have to go in our system for that. So either you think my ID is fraudulent. Why would you think that? Or you think that, or my experience with you in this moment is going to be different if you do realize that I am not a normal North American tourist and instead someone who got residency or asylum. So, you know what I mean? Like I got it through for some political reason. Why would it be different? Why would my experience traveling the country by bus be different if I am Haitian? Besides racism and xenophobia, like what would it be? If I have the ID and I'm allowed to be here, what are we talking about? Racism is everywhere. But it doesn't impact me less here. I have one of the hardest things for me here is the police. And it's not because of the police here and what they do here. It's because when I'm in America and I see police, I immediately tense up. Like, what is this interaction going to be? Same thing with customs officers coming back into the US because I've had some not pleasant experiences. But any kind of like uniform, gun, I'm like, oh, this is uncomfortable for me. But here, I've had to relax that a bit because there are a lot of police, very much a lot of police. There are a lot of police with very big guns. I saw in one of the groups the other day, I saw women warning other women not to go to Cancun because the military are like, you know, walking up and down the beach or guarding the beach with like big guns. And I'm like, oh no, that's just normal. Like that's just, maybe not on the beach in Cancun. I don't spend a lot of time there, so I don't know. But like in the city, you see big guns all the time, right? But they also, I've never had an interaction with the police where they have bothered me. I've never had an interaction with the police in Mexico where they came to me. Every time I've had an interaction with the police, it was me going to them to be like, okay, so I'm lost. Like, what are we doing? Like, I need you to show me how to get to blah. And usually they're like, if you could just cross the street and ask somebody else, that'd be great. But helpful in general. I've never had a toxic experience with a police officer here. And that makes a difference in how I feel here. And so the idea that one of the things I'm working through here is not feeling immediate fear when I see a police uniform and police officers with guns in their hands, right? Like, and military, I still feel a twinge of fear, but I'm trying to like work through that. I know that is a very, very American experience. And I don't need to feel that everywhere I go. Not saying it doesn't happen in other places in the world, but I know that my internal feeling about the police comes from my time in America. Another reason that I think racism impacts me less here than it does in the US is that here I am Black, but I'm also American. And so there is a bit of passport privilege. It happens. There's a bit of classism, because classism and racism in Mexico are very tightly, there's no space between them. No space, right? They are together. And so if you move in spaces where people think you have resources, you are given a privilege in Mexico. It's not awesome, right? Because we should all be treated the same, no matter what we come with, no matter how we present. But that's how it is. And that's how it is in most places. So here, I'm not just Black, but I'm Black plus. That sounded really terrible. I don't know how to say that a different way. I'm Black, but I'm also American. And so there's a privilege that comes with that. When I am in spaces where I'm around people who are wealthy in Mexico, every once in a while I get like ooh, what was that? I felt that, like, was that something happened? And I'm like, is that racism or classism? And the answer is, I don't know. And I'll never know, right? It's very rare, very, very rare. It's very rare that those things happen and I pick up on them. Part of this also is that I'm not fluent in Spanish. So if people are talking shit about me, they're doing it in a different language and I don't know what they're saying. And I don't mind that, right? Like, if you're gonna be racist in a different language that I can't understand. Cool. It's totally different from my experience in Buenos Aires, where I couldn't get taxis to stop for me, and I was refused service in a restaurant. Like here, no, like the taxis are stopping before I even put my hand up. They're like, if you're walking on the street, you must need a ride because what are you doing here, right? Like, so they're stopping, like, hey, you need it. And I'm like, no, I'm good, right? I know what I'm doing. I'm good. I've never been refused service in any restaurant in Mexico, any food stand. They're like, you hungry and you got money? Come on, sit down. What you eating? What's going on, right? And the service is always excellent. And so the ways that racism has shown up in my life in other cities and in other experiences doesn't show up for me in Mexico most of the time, because I do get an American privilege and I do get a bit of class privilege. But to wrap this all up in a bow, I will never tell you that there's no racism in Mexico. I am not pushing an agenda that there is no racism in Mexico. That's foolish. It's just foolish to think that. Because like, if you watch me enough to know which agendas I push, you should know that it's not that there's a racism-free place, because I don't say that ever. And also, I don't think I'm pushing any agendas. Like, I love Mexico City. I'm gonna tell y'all that I'm a Mexico City fan, but I will also tell you that it's not for everybody. So the point is that racism is everywhere. When I filmed the experience on the bus with the immigration officer, my understanding was that they were only checking for IDs of people who look like foreigners, who they looked at and said, I don't think you're from here. I want to check your papers that give you permission to be in the country. That was what I'd heard had been happening. So I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that she was checking everybody's ID. And then she came and she took mine for extra special check. And I was less pleasantly surprised. Or I was like, okay, like this lines up with what I heard before. Like this is, yep, this is what it is. And yes, it's because my skin is darker than the general populations. And that is a thing that happens everywhere. If your skin is darker than the general populations, you're unlikely to receive better treatment and more likely to receive worse. Anti-Blackness is global. So is there racism in Mexico? Yes. Are you less likely to be impacted by it than you are impacted by racism in America? Yes, I will say definitely yes for that one. But that does not mean that it's racism free. You just can't get away from something that's everywhere. That's our time for this week, and I'll see y'all next time. Oh, have you subscribed? Go ahead and do that now. Bye.